Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Anthony Hennon. Today's episode, we are talking about education reform and the looming budget. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, we have another budget deadline coming up. We still have some divide on the future of education in the state. What exactly is happening?
It's kind of the same old story, but with some very different parameters this year. So a couple months ago, we had a Commonwealth Court ruling that said our funding formula is ridiculous and inequitable, so we need to make a new one. House Democrats, with a few Republican votes, passed what they consider the new funding formula. Critics don't think it's new at all. They just think it's kind of putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole and that we need to start from scrap. The thing about it is, too, is that funding formula is essentially holds up the basis of what Democrats would like to see happen with education. And that is spending over $800 million each year for the next 7 years to satisfy what they believe would make our funding formula more equitable. Of note, Governor Shapiro has proposed $1 billion for this year alone. For context, we passed over $560 million more in education spending for K through 12 last year, and that was the biggest one-year increase we ever had. So we're talking about huge numbers here as far as that goes. Their 87-page bill doing this focuses largely on cutting charters and charter funding, and that kind of speaks right to the heart of school choice issues. Obviously, in the Senate, where Republicans are in control, that's basically a non-starter. School choice is one of their leading legislative priorities, really. And they're not going to be fans of cutting charter schools as deeply as House Democrats want to do. They think that that's just a political move, kind of an attack that seems almost entirely engineered by the teachers union. But that's really getting into the political gamemanship of it, that it will certainly drive negotiations, but hopefully, according to Governor Josh Shapiro, however, we can rise above that and find some kind of deal. So at the same time, Senate Republicans, like I said, they want school choice, and a lot of their legislative advancements in the last couple of weeks have focused on higher education reform, creating scholarship programs to attract college students both in-state and out-of-state, and to make them want to stay here. In fact, they're talking about $5,000 grants as long as graduates stay in the state for 15 months. They have to pursue in-demand careers. There's a lot of strings attached, but their idea is this is what we need to grow our workforce, and this is how we get it started. Pennsylvania has some of the most unaffordable state-run college tuition out there. So that's the problem that they want to tackle more than driving, $1 billion into public education this year.
So, there's this divide on the future of education, both K through 12 and higher. We have a divided legislature, and we have a budget pending, I believe, June 30th is when we're supposed to get it in. Last year, this dragged out for 6 months. Does it seem like we're basically having a second round of this? I know, the governor's talked about the need for compromise and how no one's going to get everything that they want. But does it seem like we have any signs here that we're going to find some equilibrium?
Likely the best indicator of whether there will be compromise is that we're in an election year. And certainly Governor Shapiro isn't up for election right now, so he's got less to worry about than, say, the legislators that are up for election. However, Shapiro said last year, let's find compromise. We can do this. Let's get a deal. And then when a deal didn't happen, then he blamed the House and the Senate for that. So he could easily do the same thing. For him, it's a lot easier to he's more Teflon when it comes to these budget issues, it seems like. That being said, there is ideological agreement in the sense that higher education is something that really needs to be fixed. Apparently, they've found compromise there before in the last couple of years. I think of the two proposals, that's the less controversial one. When reaching out to House Democratic leadership, all I got in response was a very curt, but, somewhat illuminating, if you understand how the process works, response where they said, we're reviewing the legislation. That's kind of a canned response for we don't want to commit one way or the other. They're kind of still finding their political footing on that one. As far as where the Senate stands on the funding formula, the numbers are, mind-boggling for them, and they are likely, as they've done in years past, there's going to be more money for basic education. Is it going to be $860 million? Is it going to be $1 billion? I don't think we're going to get close to those numbers. They have a real problem with the idea of spending down our surplus and, our rainy day fund for expenses that are going to continue to recur, especially if the House holds out on the Senate's tax reform plan that they've also proposed, which we've covered in the past as well. But the tax cuts, they will see as kind of steep and a little bit risky. So there's a few moving parts here. However, like I said, election year looms over them. Will there be a deal? Will they want to wait 6 months? I don't think so. So, that is the best crystal ball we have into the future. But with the way that our legislature is so closely divided this time around, as it was last year, the idea that we have anything that can be predictable is frankly, that's naive to think that we have any idea what's going to happen next.
Kristen, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.